Hi everyone, welcome to the Reading the Game, where we don't just focus on the basic things football podcasts focus on, but also on tactics, mental health, business, and most prominently, intelligence while playing. I'm your host, Ethan Reichert, and today I'm joined once again by Peter Reichert, who has 25 years of coaching experience and has a UEFA B license. Today we'll be talking about pressing. So pressing means, in its definition, is when the defending team applies pressure on the opposition. And there's many ways they can do this. We see three main ways. We see constant pressure, when a team just constantly puts pressure on the opponent. It's usually to force the ball long or force the opponent to make mistakes. The other way we see it is through pressing traps, which I'm sure we'll get into later, which is also known as option-based pressing. It uses pressing cues to trigger when a press happens, and I know Klopp is a good example of that. And the third type is counter pressing, which is winning the ball quickly after losing it, usually 3 seconds, and three of the closest players gets the ball with players nearby. And Guardiola is the main example of counter pressing. So,
yeah, I mean, fascinating watching different coaches and different stream of thought and watching where it all comes from. To me, just it's a lot of fun. It's a good way to play. It makes more proactive football instead of kind of sitting back. It makes for a little bit more.
yeah, it's definitely more exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can get into this later, but his favorite pressing of those three is definitely pressing traps, which I'm sure we'll get into. But for now, we're going to quickly talk about man-to-man versus zonal marking, which is a pretty simple concept. Man-to-man marking is when everybody takes a man. Usually you leave a center back free, and then there's different ways to press from there. But that's the general idea of the press. Sometimes a forward splits center backs. Sometimes a winger cheats from a fullback and steps up onto a center back. So there's different ways to do that. And the other one is zonal pressing, which is more common with teams like Tuchel. You sit in your area. Oftentimes you're covering two men. I think Guardiola has mentioned this in the past. You can guard two men with one positioning. So oftentimes you'll see somebody mark the winger with marking the winger's passing lane, but beyond the fullback, or the same with the fullback and the center back. And that idea of marking two people with
Marking more than one player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that, we're talking about man-to-man zone in a pressing context. I know that when I was young and all through my playing career, I had this natural aversion to man-to-man, and I somehow felt wrong. And I knew in my soul that it was wrong to run away from the ball. It was wrong to turn your back on the ball, to not see what was going on, not to be in a position to read and intercept. So I always prefer, it didn't matter the sport. I much preferred zone. And so, it is a strategy to kind of to make a high press. There are man-oriented high presses.
The main example of that would be Marcelo Bielsa.
Yeah, we saw that once when we were watching Leeds play Arsenal and
the FA Cup a couple years back.
Yeah, and that was a really neat example how they had how they ran kind of a man-oriented high press, except for one player kind of shelling between two, and just to show how you could do it. That's one way to do it, but you think about the effort it takes to chase players around the field. And I remember when Klopp came to Liverpool and everybody was like, "Oh, you're gonna press, you're gonna run all over like crazy," and he was like, "Actually, not as much as you think," and so his teams will actually, they're not geared to press from the get-go. They're waiting for certain things. And so his teams actually will sit very narrow, tight, protecting the center of the field, waiting for certain moments before they press. So it's kind of an opposite.
Yeah, and when he first came to Liverpool, he was a little bit different, was with the constant pressure, and the idea of just go, go, go. but it took a couple years when built his squad up a bit. He implemented the pressing cues and traps.
Yeah, and I think the team became more sophisticated at learning when that moment is to go, because there is a go moment, and once you're in it, you're in it, and then everybody's going. But I think the team took time as a group to learn. I've mentioned this to you, Oxlade-Chamberlain going to Liverpool from Arsenal and being taught pressing cues and things, and as a pro, saying he had never heard of these things before, like that he'd never been coached on these things.
That's shocking.
I was, that tells you something.
Yeah. And so, what are some of these examples of pressing cues?
Well, oftentimes it could be something like a player receiving with his back, facing his own goal. So, if a defensive midfielder receives a pass with his back to goal, so he's receiving blind, it could trigger an instantaneous global press from every player on the field. And this is a thing, it's not just the player pressing that ball, it means that the wingers are pressing the passing lanes of the center backs in case that ball comes back. Because oftentimes what will a defensive mid under pressure will release that back, ball, first time pass to somebody open. So you're actually like, the rest of the team realizes that it's a moment of press. So the whole team is stepping in front of passing lanes. And so it's a global thing. The other thing could be, a square pass from one center back to the other. Of course, any kind of errant pass where a pass like that goes, a little bit behind the center back where he's got to turn, or a little bit like too hard or too soft, miscontrols, things like that, or to certain players. So there would be certain cues, but it triggers a global press.
And one of the basic things I would say is a bad first touch, which is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Somebody takes a bad first touch, you got to take advantage of that.
But, in training, this would be in training in rondos or possession drills or whatever, and they'd be, you'd have groups of players, it'd be like 10 against 5, and the 5 would be like in a group waiting for the mistake. Any kind of like possession or game would be geared around these kinds of things. So they're always working on these kind of triggers. Don't go, like, stay together. You're waiting. Once the mistake is made, now we go. So it's coached into everything that they're doing.
Yeah, and it's truly remarkable because I know from hearing you talk about trying to teach press, it's not an easy thing to do, to train it and to make a team practice it. Sometimes it's pretty easy to understand on paper, but there's some players that just don't get it. You need the right players.
Yeah, some people just don't understand. We talk about transition. You talked about, and we'll talk later about pressing to win the ball back and gegen pressing, when you lose possession. But, if a player is one of these guys, is mad at his teammates or not concentrated, not switched on, you can't do it. You need players that are switched on to what's going on all around the field. I have players that are, they turn their back on the goal kicks and they're kind of jogging, no, you need players that are switched on to what you're doing. And some players have a tough time with that.
Hardworking, they can't be slow. They have to be good at anticipating.
Well, they mentally, especially, mentally slow. They've got to want it, and we know that there's players, and it's remarkable to see the high level teams like a City, like Liverpool, where you have your star players, and they're working their socks off. They're working like crazy. They work so hard to get the ball back. They work so hard. So I think it's a great example that, just because you're a good player doesn't mean you don't have to work.
Yeah, and that's a good transition to the idea of counter-pressing. I think Guardiola said our best defense is when we have possession of the ball, is our possession. Because when you have possession of the ball, the other team can't score, which is a quite simple premise. And so the idea of counter-pressing is when you lose the ball, that you get it back as quickly as possible. And I know Klopp did that with implementing attacking transitions. And Guardiola did it just to gain control of the ball.
Yeah, they would, swarm nearby. Of course, you have balance and cover, like in different parts of the field. Just to get, don't waste a second, like looking at who made the bad pass or your bad control or at the ref. But it's, 5 second. I don't know if they had the 5 second rule or whatever back in the day. But just, work very hard, especially around the ball, to try and regain the ball before the other team, can get anything going. And while they're trying to transition to attack, because that's the moment when they're very vulnerable.
Yeah, and you see that often in a lot of Guardiola's teams. He tries to implement a very intelligent defensive mid, like a Fernandinho, that can read the transition and intercept any passes and preventing any potential counterattacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you've got people pressing around the ball, but you still have to be aware, where the gaps are, where the holes are, where can they get out, and there's got to be deep. You have to watch long also, and so yeah, you got to be aware of everything. But the truth is that these teams do squeeze high, so they're gonna, most of these teams that are pressing are gonna be squeezing up pretty high. They're gonna leave some gaps. They're gonna leave some space. It's just part of the risk factor. Yeah.
Yep. Teams that press high concede higher XG goals. So it makes sense. You're more vulnerable at the back.
Right. Because they're going to give up, breakaways.
But on the plus side, I think I need to find the stat sometime, but I think the majority of goals in football come from attacking transitions and set pieces.
Yeah, I don't know the percentage. I shake my head at Liverpool and just watching when they press successfully. One of the key factors for me for Liverpool that's really fun to watch is, typically these days you got fullbacks pushing up wide, opening. You've got the ball, you're opening up the field, you're spreading out, and this was what takes me time, is to get my wingers, so to speak, in a 4-3-3, not to mark the fullbacks like goal side, but to shadow cover them so that, yeah, you're aware of them and you're kind of cutting off passes. So you're actually marking the center back, the fullback. You're cutting off passes into the defensive midfielder. And if you look at Liverpool with their front three, they defend all five. With the back four and the defensive mid. But when they win the ball, in that moment of winning the ball in the middle, they have a huge head start. Those wingers have a huge head start on the fullbacks, because the fullbacks are pushed up wide and open. And when they win it, that's where they talk about this, that pressing being the best number 10, creative 10 in the world. And you see it all the time. They get these 4-on-2s, 3-on-2s, like, numbers advantage, counterattacks, and those are great opportunities to score. And when they finish those early in games, they win. Yeah, they win.
Yeah, it's quite incredible to watch Klopp and his Liverpool team.
Yeah,
mentored by Ralph Ragnick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just reading an article about him and. Yeah, he was playing against the Dynamo Kiev when he was a player, Valery Lobanowski, and they were the first ones to press. But they got hold of videotapes from Arrigo Sacchi of Italy, and he was the first one that kind of put this on videotape, how to work in a zone. And I remember I was here in Spain mentioning is actually one of your coaches about Arrigo Sacchi, and he was like, "Oh, that's like, who's going to coach from the past? Like, he's a coach from the past." And he didn't understand that this guy's thoughts are carrying through to like Guardiola and like Klopp,
Tuchel,
that Arrigo Sacchi, like what he did, and they said they watched those videotapes and broke their VHS. And I was fortunate enough to see those videotapes back in Canada when I was a young coach, and because I liked zone, it just resonated. And that became my thing. And so this was the same thing. Now it was just at a different level, This was a guy that was in the, had the same kind of thought patterns, but he was placed to take it to Germany. And they, at that time, nobody played zone in Germany. So he was definitely fighting against an uphill battle. But they obviously tweaked it, pushed it further up the field because Saki's stuff was a little bit deeper, but it was like just narrow, tight. But to take that and to take it to another level, now we're going to push this up the field, and we're going to use that same, this just idea of movement of 11 players in coordination. And now take that thought and you can do whatever you want with it. It's like, okay, we're gonna shift this way, we're gonna shift that way, but it's gonna be in coordination. It's not just 11 players spread out doing their own thing.
So what are some of Ragnit's main ideals, principles for pressing?
Yeah, so he's this little acronym that he's got, and it's in German, but it's SARD rule, I guess. And the first one is just sprinting. So the idea is that this is like all out. It's not a half-hearted thing. It's like full bore. You go like crazy. And the next one is all together. So it's not just, one or two, but it's the entire team. And the third one is going in, and so it's like you're going to win the ball. It's a full commitment. We're going to win the ball. So you have this total belief. We go to win the ball. And the last one is they use D, but it's in German, but it's the second wave of pressure. So it's just like waves of pressure. So it's not just the first person pressurizing, but it's the second one cutting off the passing lane, and then the next one after that, and the next one after that, and I can see this in my head with my, under 18s a couple of years ago. Just, balls would be loose, and the other team is doing a halfway decent job of almost getting out of pressure, but the ball, because of the pressure, is not being played well. It's in the air. It's bouncing. It's being circulated in a not a great manner, and I would just be like, go, it's like free, the ball is still in play, and people would just be like sprinting after it, and you would regain that ball, and it was just a full commitment to go because that ball is like, it's loose. And so that's the idea, and that's his ideas.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the second wave. I find that really interesting because oftentimes when you do press, I don't think the first guy that puts the pressure on the ball wins the ball. And it kind of forces the guy to either make a bad pass, bad quality of pass, or it forces the guy to receive under pressure with a bad first touch. So I like the idea of, second wave. Mm-hmm. But obviously you have to spend time in the training ground implementing that into your team. You can't just,
You have to be intentional. And I think the majority of coaches could be more intentional. You could say it. You can say, go together. Hey, we have to press together. But are you designing a series of exercises that push and force the team to play that way? And until you do that with over and over again, until it becomes ingrained, you have not been intentional enough to get this kind of thing going. You can't do this just by saying, "Hey, we have to go together." That's not gonna do it. This is something that's worked on. Like, you got to really work on this. I know they're talking about Brendan Rodgers at Leicester and being just very intentional. Even like I talk about the rondos, the 5v2 rondos or whatever they do. There's a goal. There's a specific goal. It's like win the ball within this many passes. Like there's a precise goal. It's not just like go pass the ball around or whatever. It's like go and two guys race in there, and it's like win the ball within 6 passes. So there's a goal, and so that's coaching.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting. For the players out there that want to get better at pressing, what do you say are some of the main techniques or the main attributes, things they need to learn?
Well, it's hard if you're just a player and you want to get better at it. But to me, it's a lot about reading
the game.
But I used to talk to you when you were young. I used to talk to you. Not just to say you're in a rondo, not just to chase the ball in a in a curving, but to be more proactive in terms of your body, like faking, cutting off passing lanes, trying to force mistakes, and then so that you could catch somebody like in an error. So you're not just running and aiming blindly. You're kind of trying to trap the ball into a corner, or trying to, fake, take away something so that you can go hard somewhere else. And you're not just moving around kind of haphazardly, but with real intent. That's, individually. Hopefully you can get on a team where people are working on it together.
Yeah. So the main thing, get a good coach.
Yeah, these are. This is a full team deal, really. But in the end, the other thing is, I guess the other factor would be, everybody needs to look in the mirror and if and not be one of those players that spends time in transition, like whining about bad passes, or you fouled me, like looking for the coach to blow the whistle for a foul or something. But if you lose the ball, you better be working your butt off to get it back. That kind of thing. So it's a little bit about just concentration on work.
Yeah. You have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, Peter, for joining me today. If you guys have enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to follow us on Instagram. We'll be able to notify you when an episode comes out. If you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, you can check out our website in the link below, which contains the notes from these episodes and extra articles. Thanks for listening to Reading the Game, and have a fantastic day.